Many different mysterious events have taken place in the past that we struggle to understand, such as people who have gone missing never to be seen again, locations that are reported by hundreds of people to be haunted, or murders that have gone unsolved for decades with very little hope of ever being solved. While many theories have been put forward in an effort to solve these cases, they remain unexplained as they continue to baffle investigators and experts alike. The Dyatlov Pass incident has conjured up many strange theories in an effort to explain why 9 hikers inexplicably met their demise in the Ural Mountains. Seeing an opportunity to make a thrilling found footage film, writer Vikram Wheat and director Rennie Harlan created Devil's Pass, a documentary-style film following a group of college students who trekked to the Ural Mountains, hoping to find answers with a strange alt-history hypothesis as their basis. The 2 main characters, Holly King, a psychology student, and her classmate, Jensen Day, an amateur filmmaker, are joined by audio engineer Denise Evers and mountaineers Andy Thatcher and J.P. Hauser. The group is looking into confirming a very macabre theory involving a government experiment gone wrong that resulted in mutant humanoid creatures that would escape the facility and live undisturbed in the snowy mountains until people set foot in their territory. The theory suggests that the 9 hikers met their untimely ends at the hands of these humanoids. Conspiracies, cover-ups, and the possibility of time travel also make an appearance in the film. The movie follows the American student filmmakers to the mountains, where they begin to investigate the enduring mystery and the government cover-up conspiracy. At first, their investigation is running smoothly. They set up camp, document their findings, and recorded it all. But when the secret of what's really happening is finally revealed, things take a turn for the worst. During their stay in the mountains, the group of students are attacked by the humanoid creatures, and none of them make it out alive. In the end, Holly and Jensen have mutated into the same monsters, and the other students are left deceased. One distant detail, though, already foretold the pending attack and confirmed the existence of the creatures, and it was a detail that was easy to miss given the icy backdrop. But once viewers notice that detail, it's difficult not to get creeped out. Earlier on in the film, when Jensen and Holly are having a heart-to-heart, something appears to be moving in the background. Many didn't catch it at first, but those moving blurs weren't wolves or other wild animals. They were the mutant monsters that would later attack the crew. The creatures appear 1/3 of the way through the film, making a sneaky appearance in the background, foreshadowing what's to come. It was the summer of 1992 when Hugh and Olivia Crane decided to move into Hill House with their children Steve, Cheryl, Theo, Luke, and Nell. The Haunting of Hill House series followed the family's efforts in renovating the mansion to sell it later, but due to unexpected repairs, they were forced to stay there longer, and soon an increase in paranormal phenomena would begin. The haunting prompted the family to flee the home, and 26 years later, the family is still facing the lasting effects of that traumatic experience. The siblings are forced to confront Hill House and the ghosts that came with it. The American anthology supernatural horror is certainly one that's bound to send chills down the spine. Following The Haunting of Hill House was a second season with a different story, and a new set of characters called The Haunting of Bly Manor, which is based on another novella that's just as hair-raising. Amid the strangeness, mystery, and horror, there's something that many viewers missed: the 100-plus ghosts hidden in the background of both seasons. There's no doubt that the bent-neck lady is among the most terrifying entities in Hill House, but the show gets even more disturbing when you start to notice the dozens of ghosts hidden deep in the background, yet in plain sight. These entities pop up in the most unlikely places and during ordinary scenes. The directors intentionally didn't draw much attention to them, leaving it up to the viewer to pay close attention to the background and re-watch the entire series to catch them all. One of the very first hidden ghosts is present in The Haunting of the Hill House in Episode 1. Before we even meet the Crane family or see any obvious entities, we're presented with the image of the staircase where nothing appears out of order. That is, until you look closer to the railing, where a pale face becomes suddenly obvious through the opening. The next spotted ghost was hidden in the background in the smartest way. The scene is too busy distracting the viewer, with Stephen and his father panicking about what's in the hall, turning the doorknob, allowing him to overlook the daunting figure standing off to the side behind the young boy. A similar technique is used later when Stephen and his father are seen fleeing the house. We're so focused on the chaos that we don't even spot those subtle background figures in the foyer. In episode 2 of the series, hidden in the garden in the background is another ominous childlike face. We later learned that Luke had been seeing a child playing on the grounds on a regular basis. It seems that the ghosts are always watching. They're everywhere, all the time. This includes the scene in which Theo walks into the kitchen where Nell and Luke investigate an old-fashioned communication system. Behind the door to the right, in the upper left panel, an eerie face can be seen peering through, making this scene all the more terrifying. The dining room was a place for the entities to congregate. In the scene in which Theo is looking at the dumbwaiter, one of these ghosts is loitering around in the darkness of the dining room. Another pale face can be spotted in the basement when Theo opens the trap door. These various hidden ghosts can be spotted throughout the entire 10 episodes of The Haunting of Hill House. They're believed to be between 30 and 80 sprinkled across the season, but there could be even more than that. If there was one movie that was bound to have something strange loitering about in the background, Blue Velvet would be it. The 1986 mystery film combines elements of psychological horror and film noir. Given that it's a David Lynch movie, there's no doubt that some macabre features will be thrown into an already chaotic mix. The movie takes place in the bright town called Lumberton, where Tom Beaumont tends to his garden, and during this he suffers a stroke, prompting his son Jeffrey to return home. Jeffrey ends up discovering a severed ear in an abandoned field, starting a lengthy investigation in an effort to solve the eerie mystery. The detectives believe that the lounge sister, Dorothy Ballin, may have something to do with the case, and Jeffrey soon finds himself drawn into her twisted world. In this dark world, he encounters the psychopath Frank Booth. The story itself is straightforward. It's your classic homicidal twisted mystery. But again, this movie was made by David Lynch, creator of Twin Peaks. It comes as no shock that something is hiding in the background of an otherwise straightforward movie. But this overlooked detail is spine-chilling, and it can be found in Frank Booth's partner in crime's apartment. His partner, Ben, is the one who would hold Dorothy's son hostage and antagonize Jeffrey. In one of the scenes, we're taken back to his apartment where a gathering is underway. In a few of the shots, though, something grotesque emerges from the background, unseen by most viewers. Grotesque-looking dolls, one of the movie's most bizarre props, appear without explanation and without any acknowledgement by the visitors. Their elongated, oozing white faces are left strewn across the house undisturbed. These creepy faces have eyes like black holes and are strangely dressed up very ladylike, adding more disturbing mystery to an already unsettling film. Today, we still have no idea why those creepy-looking dolls are placed in the background, all over Ben's apartment. It appears to just be a bizarre installation with no reason behind it. In 2013, the found footage film The Borderlands Final Prayer made its way onto TV screens and found itself becoming the movie with the most gut-wrenching ending in found footage history. At first, it may sound like any other horror movie, with a synopsis revealing that a group of Vatican investigators traveled to a secluded church that has seen reports of some bizarre occurrences. What they come to find there is far more disturbing than your usual ghostly hauntings and unexpected jump scares. It's quickly discovered that this is a very different movie. The opening scene starts with Deacon, a skeptical religious brother accompanied by Gray Parker, a technology expert, arriving at the village where a church had recently opened, and is host to some inexplicable things. The two were armed with a slew of cameras to document their investigative journey, which they were required to do. The majority of Final Prayer is spooky in the most unexpected way. Disembodied voices echo through the pulpit, and doors open all by themselves. Pagan symbols and flaming lambs serve as a warning of what's to come in this far-from-normal gut-wrenching horror movie. Given the jumpy, amateur-like film technique used, it can be incredibly easy to miss some unnerving details. One detail came midway through the film, which seemed to foreshadow the ending and the fate of one of the characters. In the scene in which Gray, the cameraman, decides to take a break in the graveyard, the camera hovers over a gravestone. That stone seems to bear an inscription with Gray Parker's name on it, his date of birth, and seemingly his date of demise. This can only be seen for seconds before the engraving changes to a different name and date. It was that split second that served as a warning to the viewer of what they could expect for the movie. Many watchers didn't pick up on this background detail the first time around, warranting a rewatch. This gravestone marked an unforeseeable ending. In the final act of the film, Gray and Deacon discover a hidden door that leads into a maze of caves. They navigate the system by following the screams of their missing colleague, hoping to save him. Along the way, they discover a sacrificial altar and hundreds of small skeletal remains. The grim revelation didn't deter the pair from continuing their quest and finally reaching the last tunnel. The tunnel walls, though, are full of dirt and fleshy spots. After Gray realizes that the tunnel has shut from behind, the space is filled with a burning fluid. It turned out that the fluid was stomach acid. This was the end of Gray and Deacon, as seemingly predicted by that split-second background detail of Gray Parker's tombstone, a disturbing indication that was initially overlooked. While Lake Mungo isn't based on a true story, it certainly feels like it was. The horror mystery movie makes use of a found footage format and is set in a real location in Australia. Lake Mungo follows the aftermath of Alice Palmer's drowning. After the discovery of her body and the verdict of accidental drowning, the family buries her but soon discovers that Alice isn't at rest at all. Inexplicable events and a string of strange happenings plague the family home. Unsettled, the Palmers would seek out help from a parapsychologist, Ray Kameni, who unveils a secret double life. A string of clues lead the family to Lake Mungo, where a mysterious past begins to unravel. The film takes on a real-life feel, but incorporates supernatural elements shown by the strange occurrences and the missed appearances of Alice's ghost. As the Palmers grapple with the struggle of coming to terms with the loss of their beloved daughter, her spirit apparently haunts the family home. By the end of the movie, the family decides to leave the home, believing the spirit to be at rest, but they were very wrong. The final shot of the film is a family photo taken of the 3 surviving family members, but the photo also seemed to feature the non-surviving member. Peering out of the living room window is a faint, dimly lit figure. That white hue is Alice's ghost. Many viewers missed this very muted installment until it was directly pointed out. The missed aspects, though, didn't end there. After the credits rolled, scenes from the film began to replay, and directors started rubbing it in the viewers' faces, revealing that they hadn't spotted several times that Alice's ghost was in the frame. One such instance was when the Palmers were singing Happy Birthday, with the mother delivering a candlelit cake to the darkened room. Off to the left, peering from the darkness, is the pale, spectral face of Alice Palmer. In another scene, Russell Palmer is recorded against the backdrop of a wooded area. Inconspicuously making an appearance between the trees is a strange figure, and this again is Alice. The son of the Palmers, Matthew, was responsible for fabricating some ghostly pictures, such as one in which Alice can be seen standing off-center in front of the bush in the backyard. Alice's ghostly figure in this case isn't her. It was a photoshopped picture created by her brother. The fact that Alice's ghost has been there the whole time changes the way in which this movie is viewed, making the rewatch absolutely necessary. American horror film director Ari Aster made a few movies that are just downright unsettling. Hereditary was one of them. Sparking off 2 hours of pure horror is the passing of Annie Graham's secretive mother, whose demise reveals the skeletons in the closet. Ellen Lay's end signaled the start of a malevolence that would terrorize the Graham family. Annie, the daughter of Ellen, has 2 children with her husband Steve. They're the teenage son Peter and the eccentric daughter Charlie. Almost immediately after Ellen's burial, her ghostly figure begins to appear to Annie, and she isn't the only ghost in town. Following the gruesome demise of Charlie, Peter is also plagued by her spectral presence. This supernatural, psychological horror, though, is more than just ghosts and ghouls. Hereditary strays from the regular American horror by instituting cult worship, particularly that of a demon, King Paimon. The cult worshippers seek to bring Paimon to a physical form through possession, an evil plot that involves the Graham family exploiting their traumas and vulnerabilities. Amid the horror and obscure uneasiness, some sharp-eyed individuals managed to spot some hidden features that were easy to miss, and they're certainly disturbing. As the movie begins hurtling toward the end, more creepy things begin to emerge. Everything begins to speed up, and some of those spooky occurrences are easy to miss the first time around. Many didn't notice a particularly unsettling feature during the wide shot of the Graham home. It was right before Peter would wake up to find Annie deceased, and the camera pans to a wide-angle shot of the home and surrounding woods. The scene reveals the quick transition from day to night, and out of the darkness there emerges something. Circling around the Graham home are the almost unseen figures of the cult members. There are a dozen silhouettes strewn across the yard, leading up to the front door, and just minutes later, all of those cult members will storm the house. This missed aspect was a secret giveaway of what was to come, but it also served as a metaphorical purpose for the Grahams. They are completely entangled in this cult, but they don't realize it until it's much too late. It wasn't until social media users pointed out this feature that other fans noticed it, leaving them astounded and unsettled even more. This wasn't the only time, though, that Hereditary saw some subtle horrors in the background. Another disturbing thing spotted in the background of this film that initially went unseen by many viewers was Annie on the ceiling. In one scene that takes place in Peter's bedroom, right before that wide-angled shot, Annie can be seen on the ceiling in the corner of the room unbeknownst to her son. The possessed character actually does this many times throughout the movie. She can often be spotted crawling around on the ceiling or hanging out in a corner. It isn't just at the end of the movie that these indistinct peculiarities pop up, but at the very start of the movie, in the scene in which Peter can be seen smoking through the window, a cloud of cold air comes into the frame. Watchers pointed this out, theorizing that it was a person, possibly a cult member, already watching the Grahams. Adding to this is the foreshadowing of Charlie's demise. Charlie's gruesome end came when she attended a party with her brother, which ended in her being driven to the hospital after consuming peanuts, which she's allergic to. In an effort to make breathing easier, the girl puts her head out the window and is struck by a lamppost. This, of course, was a freak accident, but one missed background feature proved it wasn't. In the scene in which Peter and his young sister are driving to the party, the camera stops on that very same lamppost, and on it is the Paimon symbol, confirming that Charlie's demise was orchestrated by the cult. There were also clues that hinted at Joanne's involvement in the cult, particularly in the scene where Annie visits her apartment for the last time. Here, she finds the door locked, but the director still gives us a look inside of the home. The camera revealed a living space that looked down the hallway leading to the door. But on the walls of the living space, two symbols become apparent, which may have gone unnoticed initially. These symbols are clearly attached to the occult, serving as another disturbing act of foreshadowing. Among the most watched and popular horror movies, we find the American-Canadian supernatural horror Insidious. The story centers around the Lambert family, in which the son inexplicably falls into an unconscious state, becoming a vessel for a number of entities in the astral dimension, referred to as the Further. These entities seek to inhabit the boy's body. The couple experiences a variety of strange occurrences and hauntings in the home, prompting them to move to a new house in an effort to escape the paranormal activity. But it seems that the entities are latched onto the family and have moved into the new residence with them. The Lamberts find themselves in a state of constant fight or flight in their new home, leading them to seek help from a gifted medium. One of the ominous hauntings plaguing the residence is that of the dancing boy, which is one of the Further entities. This spectral being takes the appearance of a young boy dressed in Victorian-era clothing. His first encounter was with the mother of the family, Renee. Renee was in the process of taking out the trash when she peered through her living room window to see a peculiar scene. The music changed to Tiptoe Through the Tulips, making the scene even creepier. Near the record player was the dancing boy, menacingly dancing to the sinister tones. When moving to the next window, though, the figure disappears only to reappear in the hallway and proceed to terrorize Renee by running around giggling. It was this scene that was revered as one of the scariest scenes in the movie. But it gets even scarier when some viewers point out a particular aspect that many overlooked. Right at the start of the scene involving the dancing boy, Renee was gathering clothing to place in the laundry hamper. It was as she did this that a coat rack could be seen in the background. Off to the left, a strange shape can be seen, so well disguised that most viewers missed it the first time around. The shape instilled a sense of foreboding. It was the dancing boy, cleverly blending in with the hanging coat. Renee hadn't spotted him, just as most watchers. She even walks past him a second time to take the trash to the outside garbage cans. The dancing boy scene is described as a horror movie on its own, and it was the first hint that hauntings were not quite over just yet. With the help of the pause button, viewers were able to catch this subtle hint, making some wonder what else they may have missed. Perhaps the doodle of Billy from the Saw franchise on the chalkboard behind Josh Lambert? Or the foreshadowing drawings of astral projection littered throughout young Dalton's room? It Follows brought attention to the very real anxieties concerning adolescence and the fear of contamination, losing innocence and youth. It also stands as a metaphor for growing up and the anxiety that comes with it. Despite its incredibly serious undertones and metaphor, It Follows is a downright creepy film. The movie starts off with college student Jamie and her new boyfriend Hugh on a date at the cinema. When he points to someone that Jamie can't see, the two leave and head to Hugh's car. And here, he would incapacitate her using chloroform, and she later woke up bound to a wheelchair. It turned out that Hugh was sacrificing her to an entity that could take on the form of any person, although it could only move at a walking pace. The entity pursues the individual and is much like a transmissible disease. Hugh intentionally attracts his new girlfriend so that he can sacrifice her to the entity, which would then leave him alone and attached to Jamie until she passes it on to someone else. The being knows where its victims are at all times and will always be approaching. If it catches up to them, it'll end their life and subsequently pursue the previous person again. Upon leaving Jamie for the entity, Hugh flees. The following day, Jamie's curse begins, and she starts seeing the form of an old woman who remains invisible to all of those around her. Fearing for her life, the character's friends agree to spend the evening at the same house. There, she's met with another creepy form, this time a disheveled woman. That same night, a tall man with no eyes would also enter the bedroom, causing Jamie to flee. Later on in the film, the group of friends begin trying to devise a plan to prevent any of them from being slaughtered. The first conclusion they arrived at was to end the entity's life, which proved impossible. They would later come to the decision to have Jamie pass on the curse to her friend Paul, who then drives into town and passes by street workers. This scene implies that the entity was passed on to them, securing the safety of Jamie and her friends. The curse was lifted, or at least out of sight. At the end of the film, we see Jamie and Paul walking hand in hand down the street, but something seems out of place. Some eagle-eyed viewers spotted something in the distance, trailing behind the new couple. Off in the background was a figure. This worrying, almost unnoticeable detail brought about the question, who or what was that figure? Viewers were left with the unnerving thought of whether or not that was a person, or if it was the same haunting creature that's come back to follow its previous victim. In 1996, the first Scream film was released, setting off a chain reaction and ultimately becoming a franchise that still continues today. This slasher film is noted as the one that revitalized the film genre in the 90s, much like the effect the horror movie Halloween had in the 70s. Using a tongue-in-cheek approach, Scream combined straightforward scares and dialogue to produce a satire slasher film. The movie follows a teenage girl, Sydney, who's still being terrorized following the homicide of her mother. This time, it's a new slasher who targets the character and her friends, who use horror films as part of a harrowing game. The homicidal maniac, of course, is unknown to the characters as well as the viewer, and the mystery is only revealed by the end of the movie, although guesses could have been made earlier on. In the case of the first Scream movie, Billy Loomis and his friend, Stu Matcher, are behind the mask. One alarming, overlooked background feature, though, may have already anticipated this. In that one scene where Sydney is being chased through Stu's house by the notorious Ghostface, she finds herself ducking and dodging the decorations strung up in the attic. But these were more than just the usual decor. Instead, the ornamentations are in the form of eerie dolls hanging from the rafters. Taking this aspect into consideration, it becomes clear that Stu is no doubt unstable, and while they're on screen for a short moment, they provide a telling hint that something is wrong with the character. He's not just a committed horror fan, he's the horror himself. There's another disturbing feature regarding the same dolls that are strewn across the attic. It may have gone unnoticed initially, but some viewers pointed out something that's even more disturbing. One of the dolls seems to have blonde hair, and it's been positioned in such a way that it resembles the slaying of one of Ghostface's first victims, Casey Becker. Casey met her grisly end at the start of the film, when the maniac struck her with a sharpened blade several times and then strung her up from a tree. Off to the side of the Casey doll is another toy strapped to a chair. Again, this aspect may have been easily overlooked, but was reminiscent of the demise of Stephen Orth. Stephen, the boyfriend of Casey, was strapped to a chair and had his mouth duct taped before meeting a particularly gruesome end. There's also a third doll that comes into the frame in this scene. This time, it's strung up by its foot, with its arms spread out. The display in this case seemed to allude to another of the first slayings, Principal Arthur Himbry. After being attacked by Ghostface, Himbry would be discovered hanging on the school's goalposts. The realization of these disturbing features has left viewers with many questions and searching for other clues that they may have missed. Even today, some of the ominous, subtle hints are still being discovered in the background of the 1996 film, which is host to numerous hidden messages and clues. Midsommar, the most obscure, intriguing, and unassuming film of modern-day folk horrors, was unleashed upon the eyes of viewers by Ari Aster, who sought to leave a lasting impression on his fans. Midsommar's narrative was just the way to do this. Not taking on the classical paranormal-themed horror, this movie instead made use of a very real culture and a very real mysterious festival. The movie allows the viewer to tag along on a disaster-filled trip to rural Scandinavia, where the secluded inhabitants are part of a hair-raising cult who are busy preparing for the Midsummer Festival in celebration of the summer solstice. The film centers around Danny, who'd recently sustained a trauma where her sister and her parents succumbed to intentional carbon monoxide poisoning. Christian, her partner, feels obligated to stay with her during her grieving, but this also places their relationship on the rocks. Despite his intentions to break up with her, Christian reluctantly invites her to a Scandinavian trip. Upon their arrival at the rural village, things immediately begin to take a daunting turn. The visitors are given psychedelics, causing hallucinations and panic. The following day, the group would witness the harrowing ceremony, an incredibly grim ritual. Things only go downhill from here as more obscure things begin to happen, including unexplained disappearances, gruesome homicides, and a particularly odd ending that involves a lonesome hut and a bear. As the 9-day ceremony draws closer to its end, Danny finds herself becoming the May Queen, which doesn't bode well for her by the end of the festival. Aster's films are no doubt macabre, and they often leave viewers on edge, but he also seemed to have a readiness for hiding some Easter eggs in his movies, leaving viewers to find them. Midsommar was not an exception. The film is littered with some incredibly disturbing details that went overlooked during the first watch, only being spotted by sharper eyes. During the opening scenes, Danny is lying on her bed, and a peculiar painting can be seen in the background. That image is of a girl wearing a crown and petting a bear. Further on, we find that Christian is transfixed on an image of a burning bear and a fire. These two hidden features directly foreshadow the ending of the movie. Most disturbingly, though, is what happens when the group of friends arrive at the commune. Here, we see village children playing a game titled Skin the Fool. This is ultimately what happens to one friend, Mark, later on, serving as a particularly distressing presage. The foreshadowing didn't end there either. As we come to see, murals are a major aspect of this culture and are used to decorate the walls of the sleeping quarters. But these weren't simple drawings. They were premonitions. In the dorm that the group of visitors will be sleeping in, one particular drawing appears to tell the viewers of the medieval torture that one of the characters, Simon, would later be subjected to. Another particularly disturbing feature is found hidden in the trees during the scene in which Danny, the May Queen, is being carried off by the villagers. A face is defined by variations of green, ultimately taking on the form of Danny's sister as part of her psychedelic hallucinations. And In fact, it also appears that a pipe is attached to the face, making a reference to the tragic event. Given the psychedelic narrative of the story, various other features such as this one become prevalent further on. One of the strangest hidden aspects of the film occurs continuously throughout. Those references to the Wizard of Oz include a background painting of the Scarecrow and a strange character link between Christian's bear costume and the Cowardly Lion. These are only a handful of peculiar Easter eggs that some fans found spread throughout the film. Of course, they had to rewatch Midsommar several times before making these overlooked deductions. The Only Way is Essex is a very popular reality TV show that has proven to be so popular in the UK that it's seen as many as 35 seasons and shows no signs of being ended anytime soon. The show, commonly referred to as TOEI, is based in Brentwood, Essex, and is described as real people in modified situations, saying unscripted lines but in a structured way. It first aired in 2010, and since then has won the Audience BAFTA Award. But in August of 2024, one of the show's stars, James Argent, known as Arg, went missing, and fans started to become concerned that something had happened to him. Witnesses reported that they had last seen James at around 3 a.m. on the 29th of August while he was spending time at his house located in Woodford Green. Investigators revealed that he often spent time in Brentwood and nightclubs in Redbridge, and these areas were searched but to no avail. His friends and family reported that they had tried to make contact with him since he suddenly vanished, but that he wasn't answering their calls or replying to their messages. None of his friends or family could provide any clues as to his whereabouts, since he hadn't been planning on taking some time away, and hence fears started to grow that he might be in some kind of trouble, or that he simply decided to disappear of his own accord. Investigators released details on the clothes that James was last seen wearing, a blue tracksuit, and added that he was carrying a blue sports bag when he disappeared. But no new leads were received, and investigators were back at square one. His agent revealed that he was supposed to meet James at an airport on the day of his disappearance, since they were meant to fly to Majorca for a work trip, but he never showed up. But James later contacted his family to report that he was safe and that he was on his way to Blackpool. He added that he hadn't been in contact with anyone because his phone was broken, but would later open up about the incident while apologizing to fans of the show. He stated that on the morning before the flight, he'd started taking illegal substances at around 4 a.m., and when the time came for him to travel to the airport, he became paranoid and instead traveled to the country hotel, where he continued using the substances. He then fell asleep at some point and was unaware that he was considered a missing person. He admitted that his phone was working, but that he'd forgotten to pack a charger, and eventually its battery died. He since sought help for his addiction, and in November of 2024 revealed that he'd been sober for 2 years. Patricia Ann Tier Carlton's missing person case is a strange one that involves medical issues and several disappearances, but one that has a happy ending, as she was eventually found and returned to her family. Sometime in the spring of 1967, Patricia's sister, Mary Ann, decided to visit her in Houston, Texas. But by her own account, she had a strange feeling of dread while heading there, and when she arrived, she realized why this was the case. Her sister was nowhere to be found, and her children had been left unattended, something that was very out of character for Pat, and when she searched the house, she was surprised to find her asleep in her bed. But when she tried to wake her, she got no response, and realized that her sister was actually unconscious. She immediately called for assistance, and Pat was taken to a local hospital, where it was found that an aneurysm was blocking the flow to her brain. The only option was to perform a dangerous surgery, but the procedure went well. Or so it was thought. When Pat awoke, she had no idea who she was or how she got to the hospital. She was suffering from amnesia following the surgery, and didn't recognize her children, sister, or husband. She had a long road to recovery ahead of her, as she needed to learn how to eat again, and in the end, it was too much for her husband, and he decided to file for divorce, after which he took custody of their children and started a new life elsewhere. Pat was being cared for by a woman who the family had hired, but the following year, she contacted them to report that she'd gone missing. For the next 6 weeks, no one was able to track her down, until a police officer detained her for vagrancy in Alabama. Mary Ann later stated that Pat grew up in Alabama, and that's likely why she traveled back there. When she got her sister, Pat stated she had no idea how she got there, but that she was glad to have been found. She kept improving as time went by, and eventually she married a man named Troy Carlton in 1969. Troy encouraged Pat to fight for custody of her children, which she did. But 7 days before the hearing was to be held, Troy came home for lunch and found that she wasn't there. Her family searched for her for 3 weeks, and she was eventually found wandering around a different part of Houston, and again she couldn't explain how or why she had left the house. This was a pattern that would repeat 7 more times over the next few years, and in 1971 she vanished for 13 months, after which she reappeared. While she was there, she started regaining some of her memories and went to a welfare office where she would provide them with her details, and her aunt, who was living in Birmingham, was tracked down. But her aunt never picked her up, and the welfare worker didn't follow up on the case, and Pat went missing again. She was finally found living in San Francisco in 2004, but by this time Troy had passed away. Pat revealed that she had suffered a stroke, causing her to lose even more of her memory. But she did recognize her family, and she lived with them until she passed away in 2020. In 1910, Jose Lopez, better known to his friends as El Cepa, was working as a shepherd in the village of Tres Juncos in Spain. His nickname translates to the Stump, and it was given to him by his friends as a joke since he was very short and, according to them, not the brightest man. He was hired by a farmer named Francisco Antonio Ruiz, who had him tend to his sheep, but the farm manager, Leon Sanchez, didn't like Jose, and he was known to mock him relentlessly, as did the farm's security guard, Gregorio Valero. Jose had acquired a few sheep of his own, and on the 20th of August, he managed to sell a few of them, but then he inexplicably went missing. Witnesses reported seeing him walking to La Celadilla, a lagoon about 2.5 miles from the farm that was believed to contain mud with healing properties. But Jose never returned, and for the next few weeks he was searched for, but no trace of him was found. Before long, rumors started to spread that someone had ended his life. It was suggested that someone had gotten wind that he made a fair bit of money from the sale of his sheep, and that they ended his life before robbing him and disposing of his remains. When his family learned of these rumors, they contacted the authorities to report that Jose had been mocked by Sanchez and Valero while working at the farm, since he often complained to them about the uncomfortable situation he was in. They traveled to a court in Belmonte and formally accused the two men of orchestrating Jose's disappearance and added that they may have ended his life. Both men were taken into custody and questioned for hours, but in 1911, the case was dismissed when a judge decided that there wasn't enough evidence to convict them. 2 years later, Jose's family insisted that the case be reopened. Sanchez and Valero were arrested once again, but this time they were treated far more harshly, and eventually they confessed to the crime under duress. They spent more than 4 years in prison before their trial began, and according to some reports, these proceedings were plagued by inconsistent testimonies and ambiguous statements. Nonetheless, both Sanchez and Valero were found guilty and sentenced to a further 18 years behind bars, narrowly avoiding the death penalty. But the tale had one last twist in its tail. In 1925, after being imprisoned for more than 12 years, both men were pardoned despite the fact that Jose was still missing. The following year, a priest in Mira sent a letter to a priest in Tres Juncos to ask for Jose's baptism papers since he was about to get married. The priest ignored the request, likely thinking that it was a hoax, but a short time later, Jose reappeared in Tres Juncos, much to the amazement of the rest of the village. When his identity was formally confirmed, Sanchez and Valero received a formal apology and were each granted a pension of 3,000 pesos every year for the time that they spent in prison. Amy McPherson was born close to Ingersoll, California in 1944, and as an adult she became famous for being a radio preacher and Pentecostal evangelist who amassed a following of thousands. She started preaching at the age of 17 after realizing that she didn't agree with the ideals that her mother and the Salvation Army had tried to instill in her from a very young age. In 1908, she got married to a Pentecostal evangelist named Robert Semple, and she decided to adopt that belief system. Together, they traveled to China, where they started spreading the gospel. But in 1910, Robert passed away while the couple was in Hong Kong, and she decided to return home to the United States. She rejoined her mother at the Salvation Army, and there she met a man named Harold McPherson, and they got married. But the union was short-lived, as Amy decided to start preaching and healing people full-time. To do this, she traveled between towns and cities, her first sermon being held at Mount Forest in Ontario in 1915. She held fast to the belief that she could heal the sick and that people in her congregation could at times speak in tongues. After 3 years of touring, she settled down in Los Angeles, and for the following 2 decades, she held regular sermons that were attended by thousands of people at a time. She constructed a temple that cost $1.5 million, which was paid for by her followers. At some point, she claimed she had a vision of a 4-faced creature, and by her reckoning, this was a representation of the 4 roles that Jesus played, namely Savior, Baptizer, Healer, and Coming King. Hence, she decided to name her temple Church of the Foursquare Gospel. It brought hope to the poor and needy, as well as migrants from the South and Midwest who were struggling to make a living in California. By all accounts, Amy was a natural showwoman, and on Sundays, the temple would see its highest attendance of the week, with thousands of people flocking to the site to hear her preach. They would also sing hymns and psalms to the accompaniment of a 50-piece band, with the sermons being broadcast live over the radio. She also tried her hand at publishing religious magazines, and in 1923, she released a book containing several of her sermons, entitled This Is That. She authored 22 more books after that, and was often featured in newspapers. Needless to say, she had made a success of her vision, but in 1926, she suddenly disappeared without a trace. Investigators learned that she had gone to Venice Beach that day, saying she was going for a swim and to clear her head before compiling her next sermon. She took her assistant with her, but she had to leave the beach for a short while to make a phone call, which she did from a hotel close to the beach. When she returned to the beach, Amy was gone, and when she hadn't returned by that evening, the beach was thoroughly combed by searchers, many of whom were her dedicated followers. One man who was aiding in the search thought he spotted her floating out in the ocean, and he decided to swim out to investigate. It turned out that what he saw were 2 deceased seals. Unfortunately, he failed to make it back to the beach and lost his life in the water. Rumors started to swirl that Amy had drowned, or strangely that she'd been swallowed whole by a sea monster. Others believed that she had perished, but that she would be resurrected soon enough. No sign of Amy was found for the next 5 weeks, but then in June of that year, she was located in Agua Prieta on the Mexican border with Arizona. She reported that she'd been abducted from the beach by 3 strangers and was taken against her will. She claimed they had approached her and asked that she pray for a sick child who was sitting in the back of a car. When she bent down to pray, they shoved her in the car and sped off. But since her sound engineer, a married man, also disappeared at the same time, it was speculated that the 2 had run away together, and that Amy then concocted the tale when she was discovered. To this day, no one knows what really happened to Amy during that time, and it's unlikely we will ever learn the true details behind her disappearance. During the 1930s, Willie McLean, known as Wee Willie, was a famous soccer player who represented the United States at the 1934 World Cup. He was born in Scotland, but immigrated to the U.S. after his 19th birthday. His first team in the U.S. was Pullman FC, which was based in Chicago. His subsequent teams included the Canadians and Bricklayers and Masons football clubs. He relocated to St. Louis in 1934, where he played for the Sticks, Bear, and Fuller team, and that year they managed to make it to the Challenge Cup final, but only managed to win it in 1933, and again in 1934 and 5. But the following year, he collapsed on the pitch while in the middle of a game, and he was sent to a sanatorium where he remained for 9 months, and following this he moved back to Chicago. He was then included in the U.S. national squad that played 3 matches against Mexico in 1937, but he never participated in any of the games. He returned to Chicago, but never played soccer again, and decided to keep out of the public eye as much as possible. Then, in 1938, he vanished. His wife, Elizabeth, had no idea what had become of him, and for the next few years, she hoped that he would simply come home, but this never happened. Before long, it was assumed that he had passed away, never to be seen again. Elizabeth eventually passed away without ever finding out what happened to Willie, but in recent times, investigations have shed some light on the mystery. It was discovered that he spent some time in Chicago before moving to Davenport in Iowa. Here, he tried to shed his old life by changing his name to William Stewart Lang, and he found a job as a mechanic. For 5 years, everything went to plan, until he collapsed once again due to a nervous breakdown, and he spent the next 13 years at the Mount Pleasant Mental Health Institute. Here, he underwent a lobotomy procedure and received electroconvulsive therapy on a regular basis. He was eventually relocated to Davenport's Pine Knoll home, where he received assisted living, and he remained there until his passing in 1977. Many people would have passed away without ever learning of Willie's fate, but today we know that he simply decided to start a new life in a new city. Scout Taylor Compton, the famous actress and singer, broke into the film industry in 1998 when she appeared in the movie AWOL and a short film entitled Thursday Afternoon. But she first became a household name after appearing in the famous television shows ER, Frasier, and Ally McBeal. She made several appearances on The Jay Leno Show and was also featured in several advertisements, including ads for Fujifilm and the Disney Cruise Line. But she isn't just a talented actress. At one point, she decided to try her hand as a singer and started taking singing lessons. Realizing that she had some talent, she performed the theme song for the short film Chicken Night, in which she also made an appearance. Following this, she recorded a pop-rock album featuring her on vocals and drums. She also worked as a voiceover artist in the films that include The Core, The Princess Diaries 2 Royal Engagement, and appeared in her first major Hollywood film Sleepover in 2004. It's fair to say that Scout has had a successful and varied career, during which she's mostly remembered for her recurring role on the TV show Gilmore Girls, but it hasn't been without its challenges. On the 12th of August, 2005, Scout was at her father and stepmother's house in Apple Valley, California, when she suddenly disappeared. For 2 weeks, no one received any word from her, and no one had any idea what her plans were, or what the circumstances surrounding her disappearance were. Searches were conducted, and appeals for information were made, but to no avail, and her fans started to fear the worst. But an investigation was underway, not only by the police, but also by the Apple Valley School District. An officer got wind of a rumor that one student at Granite Hills High School was bragging about the fact that Scout was staying at his house, and the news was relayed to him by a PE teacher at the school who'd overheard the student talking about Scout in one of his classes. The teacher then brought this information to the officer, who asked for the boy's name, and when he checked the attendance register for that day, he noticed that the student had been marked as absent. He became suspicious of the situation, and after acquiring the student's address, he decided to travel to the home to investigate. Upon arriving at the house, he knocked on the door and a woman answered, unaware of why he was there. At first, he thought it may have been a false lead, but when the woman opened the door a little wider, he managed to take a look inside and spotted Scout sitting on a couch in the family's living room. She likely knew why he was there and didn't resist when he asked her to leave with him. According to the police records, Scout was listed as a missing person who'd run away from home, and she's never revealed why she suddenly decided to leave her family's home without telling them of her plans or offering some kind of explanation. Today, she continues her successful career as an actress and has started broadening her horizons into the video gaming world. 26-year-old Minna Nurminen is a member of the very wealthy Herlin family that resides in Helsinki, Finland. The family owns the Cone Corporation, a multinational company that specializes in elevator and escalator technology that's used in as many as 60 countries worldwide. But as is so often the case, being a member of a rich family can have some serious risks, as Minna discovered in May of 2007 when she disappeared, and it was feared that she'd been abducted for ransom. These fears were later found to be true when it was discovered that a corporate lawyer named Juha Turunen was responsible, much to the disbelief of his coworkers. In May of that year, he disguised himself as a postman and managed to gain access to Minna's apartment. The details of what happened next have not been released, but it's now known that he used violence to force Minna into a box and told her to keep quiet while he transferred the box to his car. He then drove to an apartment that he had purchased and prepared ahead of time by adding soundproofing. He held her there for the next 2 weeks while awaiting a ransom payment from her family. Turunen was the unlikeliest of suspects, as he'd been working at the University of Turku while also working for KPMG, an accountant's firm. He's well educated, able to speak different languages, and even ran as a Social Democrat candidate for the region's municipal elections at one point, but he didn't see much success. Soon after the abduction, he contacted Mina's family and demanded an €8 million ransom for her release. They felt they had no choice but to pay the money, which they then did, but they decided to keep news of the incident private and only revealed what had happened once the ordeal was over. Turunen then started hiding the money in different areas in Turku, but at some point he dropped several of the bills in a parking lot since he was transporting it in a trailer that he had attached to a bike. Luckily, Mina would later report that while she was being held against her will, Turunen had been treating her well enough and didn't show any signs of getting violent with her. Once the ransom was paid, he contacted the family once again, stating that he would let her go in a forested area about 15 miles from Turku. He stayed true to his word. In 2 weeks after she was abducted, Mina was located. She was unharmed and quickly reunited with her family, but investigators were eager to catch the culprit. CCTV cameras from a parking garage showed Turunen enter with the trailer in tow, and they knew he was the man that they were after. He was arrested in the very apartment where he had held his victim, and there the police found some of the equipment that he had used, as well as some of the ransom money that he hadn't gotten around to hiding yet. Most of the rest of the money was eventually recovered, and Turunen was set to stand trial for his crime. During his trial, his lawyer argued that he was being treated badly while he was incarcerated, but this had no influence on the outcome. He was ultimately found guilty of kidnapping and sentenced to 9 years behind bars. One would imagine that it would be hard to intentionally disappear while serving as a governor. But Republican South Carolina Governor Mark Sanford proved in 2009 that this is not the case. On the 28th of June that year, news broke that he had gone missing. His wife Jenny and security staff had no idea where he had gone or whether something untoward had happened to him. And for the next 6 days, his whereabouts remained unknown. His disappearance made news nationwide, and investigators revealed that his phones had been switched off and that he was no longer replying to text messages. During this time, Jenny stated that she wasn't too worried, as he likely needed time away to do some writing, and that he had done this in the past. He had, however, always returned home after a day or two, and when he was still missing 6 days later, a lot of people started to become concerned for his well-being. Employees from Sanford's office attempted to dispel rumors that were emerging by stating he told them where he was going before disappearing, and that he was in the midst of a hike across the Appalachian Trail. Nevertheless, many people felt that he should have at least kept in touch with his superiors, and most importantly his family, especially since he still hadn't come home for Father's Day that year. But on the 23rd of June, Sanford contacted his office and stated that he was surprised by the fact that so many people had taken an interest in his disappearance, and that he would be back at his office on the 24th. He'd finally been found, but the fallout of his disappearance was yet to come. Sanford would later admit that he hadn't been writing or hiking the Appalachian Trail, but that he was spending time with Maria Belinchapu, the Argentinian woman with whom he was having an affair. He added that he spontaneously decided to fly to Argentina to see her, and that he didn't think his absence would cause such a stir, a statement that his fellow governors found hard to believe. Sanford called for a press conference, during which he tearfully apologized to his wife and children, adding that he was planning to resign from his post as head of the Republican Governors Association following the scandal. It would later come to light that he met Chapu in 2001 while they were both in attendance at an open-air dance in Uruguay. They met again in New York 3 years later, after which Jenny became aware of the affair. When asked why his staff claimed he was hiking the Appalachian Trail, he first stated that he didn't know, but later added that he may have mentioned it to them and that he was thinking about going hiking since he felt like doing something exotic. In June of 2022, 48-year-old Dawn Dumont Walker was a member of staff for the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, but she and her 7-year-old son inexplicably went missing on the 22nd of July, much to the dismay of her friends and family. According to her friends, Dawn was last in contact with them on the evening of the 22nd, and she was last seen at around 6 p.m. in the 300 block of Owen Manor in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in Canada. She was last spotted at a business premises in that area, and when it became clear that she had gone missing, it was speculated that she had her son Vincent with her. The following day, a member of the public happened upon her purse near Chief Whitecap Park and handed it over to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. But this information wasn't relayed to Saskatoon officers until the 25th, 2 days later. In the meantime, Dawn's friends and family were frantically trying to reach her, but being unable to do so, they contacted the police and opened a missing person case. A search was immediately started by the FSIN along with the Saskatoon police. On the 25th of June, it was revealed that Dawn's car, a Ford F-150 truck, had been found abandoned at Chief Whitecap Park, and that some of her personal belongings were found inside, including a blanket and what they described as recreational items. The surrounding area was searched on foot and from the air with the use of a police plane, but no further clues were found. The police decided not to issue an Amber Alert since they didn't feel that the case met the necessary requirements. But the FSIN decided to issue their own Amber Alert in hopes that it would result in further information. When no sign of either Dawn or her son was found, the South Saskatchewan River was searched by police divers, while others continued scouring the banks on foot. Dawn's family issued a plea to the public for anyone with information to come forward, but no such information was received. Her family then also revealed that Dawn had been the victim of domestic violence in the past, but it wasn't known whether this was a factor in her disappearance. Investigators reiterated that they did not suspect foul play in the case, or that any kind of criminal activity was at play. But they did appeal to anyone with CCTV footage of Chief Whitecap Park to release that footage to them, but again, no one came forward. In August of that year, her family stated that they were offering a $10,000 reward for any information leading to the mother and son's location. They also felt that the search area had to be widened since there was a possibility that they had crossed the border. Investigators gained access to Dawn's cell phone and bank records, but found nothing of any use. Her family started to fear the worst, but then on the 5th of August, they breathed a huge sigh of relief when the pair was finally found. It was revealed that Dawn and her son had crossed the United States border illegally, and that they'd traveled to Oregon. It was reported that they were both in good health and that they would be brought back to Canada as soon as possible. Dawn was charged with kidnapping and identity fraud and forging a passport, along with 6 other charges, and she pleaded guilty, stating that she'd fled to get away from a domestic violence situation. She was handed a 1-year conditional sentence and 8 months of probation. Barbara Briley, a 71-year-old woman from Mays Landing in New Jersey, went missing on the 24th of December, 2018. And to make matters worse, she disappeared along with her 5-year-old granddaughter, Lamira, while on a Christmas road trip during which they planned to visit some of their family. According to Barbara's family, she and Lamira set out from Atlantic County that day and planned to travel to North Carolina, and they told the rest of the family that they would keep in touch while they were on the road. On the 24th of December, they stopped at a gas station in Rutherglen, Virginia, and from there they called their family to let them know that everything was going well and that they were having a good time. They confirmed that they would be in touch again and set off once more. But when Barbara went silent, her family started to grow concerned, and they contacted the police to file a missing person report. They reported that Barbara was driving a silver Toyota RAV4 and reiterated that it was an emergency since Barbara had Lamira with her. The Anson County Sheriff's Office worked together with the Hamilton Township Police, and a search was started. The family added that Barbara had contacted them after she stopped at the gas station to ask for directions, and that she called once more to inform them that they'd been delayed thanks to slow traffic. But when the family tried to call Barbara for an update, she didn't answer her phone, and their family started to worry that something may have happened to her and Lamira. They were concerned that they may have gotten lost or stuck while driving through the mountains, and that there was no cell phone signal to call for aid. They had one consolation, though, the fact that Barbara used to work as a New Jersey transit driver, and hence she was used to making long trips on the road. She was always diligent about answering her phone that she always had with her. The search lasted for several days, and investigators found CCTV footage from the Rutherglen gas station showing Barbara arriving at the store at around 5:40 p.m. She was then seen leaving again at around 6 p.m. When the cashier was questioned, she stated that Barbara had stated she was lost and asked for directions. The cashier helped her with her GPS, and once she was confident about her heading, she got back in her car and left. With all search efforts proving fruitless, her family started to fear the worst, but then they got some news that lifted their spirits. It was reported that a man who lived in Dinwiddie County spotted a vehicle that was parked about a mile from the nearest paved road, and finding this strange, he decided to investigate. When he arrived, he found Barbara and Lamira close to the car that was parked on a dirt road on private property. Barbara was not in the best shape, but Lamira was alert and uninjured. He immediately called for assistance, and when the police arrived, they found that Barbara was awake but unresponsive to questions. She was flown to VCU Medical Center in Richmond, where she arrived in serious condition but did go on to make a full recovery. It would later be discovered that Barbara had decided to take the dirt road, but after driving just a short distance, she drove over a small tree and got her car stuck. They remained there for several days, but luckily had some drinks and a few snacks to keep them alive. Both Barbara and Lamira were reunited with their family after receiving medical treatment. In April of 2005, 44-year-old Wendy Marie DeHoop was working for Georgia Pacific Mill in Hasley, Oregon. She and her husband Dan were living in Cottage Grove, and on the morning of the 22nd of that year, the couple got ready for work as they would on any other day. But the day would turn out very differently, as Wendy would go missing, never to be seen by her husband again. The couple left their house early that morning since Dan had to start his shift at Home Depot at 7 a.m. They drove to his workplace, which was located at the 1000 block of Green Acres Road, and Wendy dropped him off before traveling 30 miles to her own workplace. But she never showed up for her shift, which her boss found very strange. And when she remained missing the following day, both Dan and her boss reported her as missing to the police. Almost a week later, a man walking his dog came across Wendy's purse, which was lying on the ground, and he turned it in to employees at the Bymark store in Eugene. When the purse's contents were checked, it was found that Wendy's wallet was missing, and it was immediately speculated that she might have been the victim of a robbery. The same man who'd found her purse would make yet another discovery when he came across her 1990 Toyota Corolla SR5, where it had been abandoned on the Lorraine Highway in South Eugene. Unfortunately, Wendy wasn't with the vehicle. In order to search it properly, the vehicle was impounded by the authorities, who then took it to the Oregon State Police Crime Lab, which is located in Springfield. The car was thoroughly searched and processed, but offered up no further clues as to what may have happened to Wendy. There was no sign of a struggle that had taken place inside the car, but since Wendy wasn't found, there was still a major cause for concern since two other women, Helen Orderman Pratt and Rebecca Lynn Hess, had vanished in the area in the month before Wendy disappeared. Investigators considered the idea that Wendy may have simply decided to disappear of her own volition. But since her car had been abandoned and her purse was found lying by the side of the road, this seemed very unlikely. But they also stated that they found no evidence to believe that she'd been a victim of foul play, since the car didn't show any evidence that she'd been held against her will, or that a struggle had taken place at any point. Wendy is described as having black hair and brown eyes. She stands 5 foot 6 inches tall, and at the time that she went missing, weighed between 145 and 155 pounds. The last time that she was seen was by Dan, and she was wearing a suit with black pinstripe pants, and Dan believes she may have been wearing a silver ring with a diamond-cut design on her left ring finger. It should also be noted that Wendy's belly button was pierced. She has circular marks on her back, a C-section scar on her abdomen, and several scars on her left arm and leg. She's also known to wear contact lenses. Wendy's case remains open, and investigators have asked anyone who sees her or who has information that may lead to her case being closed, contact the Lane County Sheriff's Office at 541-682-4311. Wendy's name as case number is MP875. Dietrich Julian Foster has been missing from Independence in Kansas since the 12th of April 2020, when he was 37 years old, and due to the evidence that was gathered in his case, investigators believe he may have been the victim of foul play. At the time, Dietrich had just started in a new position at FedEx, having previously worked as a corrections officer and a security officer for a private company. He was known to be very close with his family, especially his 2 daughters, though he was no longer married as he and his wife had gotten divorced. Dietrich was in the habit of using prepaid phones until they were shut off, after which he would simply buy a new one. On the 4th of April, he called his ex-wife and told her that his phone would be shut off again soon, but that he would be in touch as soon as he bought a new one. Following this, he remained unusually quiet, and his family became concerned since he never went very long without getting in touch. When he failed to call his mother for Mother's Day, they became even more worried since this had never happened before. There was no way for anyone to get in touch with Dietrich since his phone had been shut off, and so when he still remained silent by the 12th of May, his family decided to file a missing person report with the Independence Police Department. They informed the police that he always kept in touch, and that they were worried something untoward may have happened to him. Concerns only grew when Dietrich failed to attend a celebration for his and his twin sister's birthday, and furthermore, he didn't contact his daughters for either of their birthdays. When Father's Day came around, and Dietrich still hadn't contacted his daughters, his family's fears were escalated. A few of his friends would contact the authorities in April to state that they'd seen him in Independence after he went missing, but none of these reports ever went anywhere. Investigators later told the family that they'd found evidence that led them to believe that Dietrich's life had been ended, but this information has never been released to the public. As a result, a $5,000 reward is being offered to anyone who comes forward with information, leading to Dietrich's case being solved, and the person or people responsible for his disappearance being apprehended. Dietrich is described as having black hair and brown eyes. He stands between 5'9" and 5'11", and weighs between 180 and 190 pounds. He can also be identified by a scar on his chest, the result of heart surgery that he had in the past, as well as a scar on his nose. Furthermore, he has several distinctive tattoos, the first being of a cross on his right forearm, the second being the zodiac sign for Gemini on his right arm. He has another tattoo of 3 dice on his left arm, a name tattooed on his arm, and the word "foo" on his abdomen. If you or anyone you know happens to know where Dietrich is or who may be responsible for his disappearance, you're urged to contact the Independence Police Department at 620-332-1700. Alternatively, you can get in contact with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation at 785-296-4017 with any information you have. Dietrich's nameless case number is MP70553. It's often the case that when someone becomes successful in the business sector, they start making enemies since their competitors work equally as hard to make money, and when they fall behind, they may become resentful. According to those who knew Barry Sherman, the founder of a pharmaceutical company called Apotex Inc., this was certainly the case since the pharmaceutical industry is known to be a very competitive one. Barry started his road to success when he became the owner of Empire Laboratories. The business originally belonged to his uncle, but when he passed away, Barry inherited the already established company. But in order to found his own company, he sold Empire Laboratories after just a few years. And by 2017, he'd become a very rich man as he employed as many as 10,000 staff and was making around $1.5 billion every year. Barry and his wife Anna, better known as Honey, were known to be caring people who often contributed to their community as they supported hospitals, community centers, and colleges in Toronto. One of his biggest donations ever, a total of $50 million, was made to the United Jewish Appeal, and before long the couple had become well known in the political arena and the business sector. But as the business grew, Barry was accused of inflating prices, and since he was affiliated with the Liberal Party, people became concerned that he may be operating under a conflict of interest. He was also known to be rather litigious, and hence lost a lot of friends and gained a lot of enemies on his way to the top. Some of his family members stated that he wasn't really the kind-hearted philanthropist that he portrayed, and that he only cared about putting more money in his own pockets. Carrie Winter, Barry's cousin, stated that he often fantasized about ending Barry's life but never followed through on those thoughts. He even revealed that Barry had hired him years earlier to end Honey's life, though this has never been proven, as he claimed that Barry eventually called the hit off. Barry once speculated that someone may one day end his life thanks to his business dealings, and it seems that in 2017, his prediction may have come true. On the 13th of December of that year, Barry and Honey had a meeting with the builder who would ultimately be the last person to see them alive. They'd been planning to sell their house, and the following day, Barry didn't show up for work, something that was completely out of character. 2 days later, an estate agent would make a horrific discovery. Having traveled to their home to show it to clients, the agent took the clients down to the house's basement to show them the indoor pool. And here they found Barry and Honey where their lives had been ended, with belts around their necks. Honey's cell phone was found in the bathroom, suggesting she'd tried to hide there before being found. Investigators found no sign that someone had broken into the house. All the doors and windows were locked, and hence it was assumed that Barry had ended Honey's life before taking his own. But the coroner's report stated that this was a homicide case. A strange figure was caught by CCTV cameras outside the couple's house, but they've never been identified, and it's uncertain whether they were involved in the crime. People immediately started speculating that the couple had been killed by someone in the pharmaceutical industry, or by one of their family members, but the case has never been solved and remains under investigation. 26-year-old Risha Lewis has not been seen since the 21st of January, 2006, after she inexplicably disappeared from Elkton in Maryland, and her case remains a mystery as her whereabouts remain unknown. Risha hailed from Newcastle, Delaware, where she resided in the 400 block of Morehouse Drive. She traveled to Elkton on the 20th of January, something that she did on weekends since she had a friend who lived in the area. She arrived there, and at about 1:30 p.m. the next day, she contacted her family back home to inform them that she was about to start heading back. She then drove away from her friend's house, never to be seen or heard from again. When Risha failed to show up at home, her family tried to contact her, but all efforts went unanswered. She was then reported as missing, and during these ensuing investigations, her cell phone was monitored. Strangely, it remained activated but was never used again. For the 9 months of the investigation, the police were at a loss as no sign of Risha was found, but on the 17th of October of that year, Risha's white 1997 Crown Victoria was found in Newark, Delaware, about 14 miles from her house. The area around the car was thoroughly searched, but since it had likely been there for some time, no additional clues were found. The inside of the car was also searched, but all of these efforts proved fruitless. There have been no additional sightings of Risha, and investigators remain baffled as to what may have happened to her. Her family still holds out hope that she will eventually be found, and in an effort to help identify her, they've released a description of her. Risha has black hair and brown eyes. She stands 5 foot 3 inches tall, and at the time she disappeared weighed 130 pounds. She has a pierced eyebrow and a scar on her abdomen from a C-section. She also has several tattoos that may be useful in identifying her if she's spotted. The name Kev is tattooed on her upper arm, along with a set of flames. She also has her own name, Risha, tattooed on one of her wrists, and the name Jamie on her calf. Furthermore, she has a tattoo of a butterfly on her chest, and either barbed wire or vines on her back. She was last seen at her friend's house in Elkton, and at the time she was known to be wearing several pieces of jewelry, including a gold rope necklace and a gold rope bracelet. The necklace also contained a pendant with the phrase "Mommy and me." It's now been 8 years since Risha went missing, but her case is still being investigated. If you've seen her or know where she may be, you're asked to contact the Newcastle Police Department at 302-395-8171. Risha's NamUs case number is MP2261. The George Hotel and Pilgrim's Inn first opened its doors in Glastonbury, England in 1475, according to most sources, and it became so well known that it was even visited by King Henry VII. At the time, it was seen as an exclusive hotel, since only the wealthy could afford to stay there. After the hotel was constructed, the decision was made to build an inn that could accommodate pilgrims who were traveling through the area at a time when the War of Roses was raging, and the inn is still a prominent feature of Glastonbury Abbey today. But while the hotel still amazes its visitors with its ornate decorations and architecture, it has a darker side that several people have seen. It's rumored that the 3-story building is haunted, a rumor that's helped along by the fact that the atmosphere inside is very reminiscent of medieval times. It's said that King Henry VIII also stayed at the hotel, specifically in a room on the second floor from where he watched as the abbey was razed to the ground, after he'd ordered this to be done. But there's an element of doubt about this theory, since he had by this point become so overweight that he could barely walk under his own steam, and therefore would likely have opted for a room on the ground floor, rather than take on the stairs leading to what's now known as the Henry VIII room. As for the spirits that are said to be present in the hotel, the first is that of a monk who's been seen wandering through the hallways. He's usually spotted early in the morning before the hotel gets busy, and several guests have reported hearing the floorboards creak as he passes by. On some occasions, he's seen in the company of a graceful woman who follows close behind him, and it's said that she always has a look of yearning on her face, though it isn't known who she was when she was still alive. One guest who visited the hotel during the 1970s claimed to have had a very close encounter with the monk. The woman had gone up to her room for the night when the monk suddenly appeared as if out of nowhere while she was lying in bed. The monk then walked over to the bed and sat down, causing the sheets to tighten around her as she did so. He remained in the room for about 15 minutes, according to the guest, but he wasn't alone. She stated that there were two other figures with him, though she couldn't identify them since they appeared as a strange kind of mist that hovered behind him. A medium who investigated the hotel stated that he believed the monk and the woman were in a relationship, but since the monk was supposed to be celibate, they never became intimate and are now endlessly fated to dwell the halls of the hotel together, with the woman forever pining after the monk. Other guests have reported seeing the visage of a tall man in a blue jacket on occasion, and at times they've heard the sounds of voices arguing or music coming from unoccupied rooms. There have also been reports of the smell of cigar smoke in some areas, and in some of the rooms the lights or televisions will suddenly turn on and off without explanation. In the cellar, people have heard the sound of disembodied footsteps, seen doors slamming when no one is near them, and on occasion, the sound of someone coughing can be heard. There have also been sightings of a second monk who's said to have passed away in one of the rooms, which has now been given the name the Haunted Cell. In most missing person cases, it's quickly discovered that the victim has disappeared, and a missing person case is opened with the nearest police department. But this wasn't the case when 26-year-old Nusseibeh Hassan, a Jordanian-Canadian reporter, vanished without a trace. Nusseibeh went missing in 2006, but it wouldn't be until 9 years later that her case was investigated, when she was finally reported as missing. At the time, she was known to be living with her boyfriend in Hamilton, Ontario, while her family resided on a property in Millgrove. The last time she was seen was when one of her family members gave her a ride from Hamilton back to her family's house, and after that she mysteriously disappeared and was never seen again. It isn't known whether she was dropped off at the property by the family member or not, and if not, why this wasn't done. If this was the case, she surely would not have gone missing, but these details have not been released to the public. 9 years later, one of Nusseibeh's sisters, Sarah, decided to file a police report in an effort to find her, and it isn't known why this wasn't done immediately after she went missing. Surely, if an investigation took place at the time, her case may have been solved by now, and since so much time has passed, any clues that were present will now have been destroyed. During an interview, Sarah stated that Nusseibeh was in the habit of staying away from home for prolonged periods when she was a teenager, but added that she would always eventually come home. She was then asked why the family waited for 9 years before opening a case with the police, and she replied that they were used to her being gone from home for extended periods, and that they simply hadn't noticed she was missing. But strangely, she stated that she thinks about her sister every day when she goes to bed and when she wakes up. Investigators are speculating that Nusseibeh's life was likely ended on the day that she went missing, but Sarah refuses to believe this, as she's hopeful that her sister is still alive and happy wherever she may be. The property where the family lived was extensively searched with the use of drones, search dogs, and ground-penetrating radar, but these efforts have proved fruitless so far. These searches were conducted after the property was sold, and most of the family now resides in Jordan, many of whom have been uncooperative with the investigation for reasons unknown. It is known that Nusseibeh and her father, Moses, didn't have the best relationship, and on one occasion, she filed a report with the Children's Aid Society, after which she was taken into foster care but returned home 2 months later. There are reports that when Moses was on his deathbed, one of his children came to him to confess that they'd ended Nuseba's life in order to save the family's honor, since she refused to obey her father's rules, such as wearing a hijab at all times. The resulting investigation found no traces of Nuseba after 2006, and hence it's assumed that she is no longer alive, but only time will tell if this strange and complicated mystery will ever be solved, and whether the person responsible will ever be brought to justice. Usually, when a ship is in peril, its crew will send out a distress signal in hopes that nearby ships will hear it and come to the vessel's aid. In some cases, the distress signal is responsible for the crew being rescued, but other cases end more tragically, with the ship ending at the bottom of the ocean. In even stranger cases, the ship and its crew are never seen again. But the case of the Jianseng doesn't conform to any of these scenarios. In fact, the ship's very existence only became apparent when it was first spotted floating aimlessly off the coast of Queensland, Australia, specifically in the Gulf of Carpentaria. When the ship was first spotted, it was reported to customs officers who then made their way out into the ocean, but they were faced with many questions, some of which still remain unanswered. While they were able to identify the 260-foot ship's name after boarding it, they couldn't figure out who it belonged to or where it had sailed from before seemingly being abandoned. They were also unable to find out what country it was registered in. Upon boarding the vessel, they found that a broken tow rope was hanging from its bow. They went to the deck below and found no signs of life, leading them to believe the ship had at some point been inoperable and was being towed to an unknown location before being lost at sea. It's been speculated that when the towing rope broke, the decision was made to simply abandon the ship, and it then drifted for an unknown amount of time before being spotted near Australia. During an investigation, it was found that the ship had been abandoned for some time, since no signs were found that any human activity had taken place on board for quite a while. The possibility that the vessel had been used in a smuggling operation was also ruled out, but the vexing question of where the ship came from still lingered. There was no indication that the ship had run into trouble, and it seems likely that the crew made their way off the ship in a calm and timely manner. But there was one clue. The ship contained a large amount of rice, leading investigators to speculate that it was used to resupply fishing boats that were operating outside of Australia's exclusive economic zone. Once the ship had been thoroughly searched, a tugboat was sent to bring it back to shore in Weipa. A customs officer told a media outlet that it's virtually impossible to locate the ship's country of origin, since it contains very few markings, none of which have been helpful. None of the crew's documentation was found on board, and by the condition of the ship, it seems likely that it had been stripped of parts before being abandoned. It is entirely possible that the ship was never registered, and hence its country of origin may never be found. While the Jianseng was labeled as a ghost ship, it bears very little resemblance to the best known of these, the Flying Dutchman and the Mary Celeste. The resulting investigation couldn't identify the owner, and as a result, it was towed into deep water in April of 2006, where it was finally scuppered, taking its secrets with it to the bottom of the ocean. The Great Salt Lake is situated in the state of Utah and is considered to be the largest saltwater lake in all of the Western Hemisphere. But it isn't only known for its enormity, since many myths and legends have emerged about the lake over the years, some of which are rather outlandish. One of the most famous stories in Salt Lake County concerns a man named Jean-Baptiste, who's said to have robbed as many as 300 graves in the area in the mid-1800s. He pilfered the graves for jewelry, clothes, and anything that he thought was of value, but he was soon caught. He was eventually exiled to Fremont Island instead of being executed, and not much is known about his existence after that. It's known that he survived on the island for at least 6 weeks, but it's thought that he then constructed a raft out of wood and cow's hide and escaped his exile, though this has never been confirmed. But this is without a doubt the tamest of the lake's tales. In 1877, a man named J.H. McNeil, along with multiple employees of the Barnes & Co. Saltworks Company, was standing beside the lake when they spotted something truly strange near the north shore. Some sources state that the incident took place at dusk, while others claim it happened at dawn, But whatever the case may be, the group of men were astonished when they spotted a massive animal with the body of a crocodile and the head of a horse swimming in the water. As soon as they spotted it, the creature let out a loud bellow and charged at them where they stood on the shore. They took flight up a nearby embankment and hid in the bushes until sunrise the next morning. The creature is now known as the North Shore Monster, though some people believe that this was merely a case of mistaken identity, as they believe the men actually saw a buffalo wading in the water. But it isn't the only strange creature rumored to live in the lake. In 1847, or thereabout, a man called Brother Bainbridge reported seeing an animal akin to a dolphin swimming in the lake. And since a dolphin could never survive such high salinity levels, it was rumored to be yet another unidentified monster. Added to this are reports that the lake contains sections of underwater quicksand. One man reported in 1939 that he'd lost 6 of his horses to the quicksand after they seemingly wandered off course and into the water. But several studies have been conducted, none of which found any evidence that quicksand is present in the lake. There have also been reports of massive waterspouts that appear over the lake on occasion. Then there are the tales of huge whirlpools that open up without warning. One man reported that while he was aboard a schooner on one occasion, the vessel encountered one of these whirlpools and was likely able to make it out to sea without being pulled under. Many people feel that the whirlpools don't really exist, and that the witnesses who reported them had actually encountered waterspouts. They didn't know what the spouts were and so called them whirlpools instead. Whether the North Shore Monster really exists is up for debate, as is the existence of the strange dolphin-like creature that was seen there. But to many people, the Great Salt Lake remains a mysterious place with even more mysterious legends. 31-year-old William Smolinski, better known to his friends and family as Billy, mysteriously vanished on the 24th of August 2004 from his hometown in Waterbury in Connecticut, and his fate remains unknown. On the day that he disappeared, Billy was last seen at around 3:30 p.m. by his neighbor, who later reported that he'd come over to his place to ask if he could look after his dog, a German Shepherd named Harley, while he traveled up north to look at a car that was up for sale. The neighbor agreed and Billy set off, leaving Harley inside his home. The following morning, his neighbor went to his house to feed the dog, but found that all the doors were locked, and he found it strange that Billy's pickup was still sitting in the house's driveway. He immediately contacted the police, who then searched the truck, and inside they found his keys and wallet where they'd been hidden under the driver's seat. Billy's ex-girlfriend, Madeline Gleason, told the police that she'd seen him at about 4 a.m. on the day that he went missing. She told them that Billy had recently ended their relationship since he was convinced that she was seeing another man, Chris Sorensen. After speaking for a while, Billy left but seemed to be depressed. When his phone records were checked, it was found that he'd made 3 calls to Sorensen, who told investigators that he'd received a message on the 24th of August from an unknown man, later found to be Billy, who warned him to watch his back. He'd also made another call to another of his ex-girlfriends, in which he invited her to accompany him to Six Flags the following weekend. Inside Billy's house, police officers found a receipt showing that he visited a Burger King restaurant at around 3 p.m. His bank records were checked, and it was found that he deposited his last paycheck, but had not accessed the account since he disappeared. 2 years later, investigators received information that Billy had assaulted Madeline, and in retaliation her son, Sean Karpiuk, had ended his life. The tipster claimed that Karpiuk and another man, Jason Lee, then disposed of his body by burying him at one of Karpiuk's work sites. The grave was then reportedly covered with concrete, but this information could not be followed up on, since Karpiuk passed away in 2005. 2 years later, Chad Hansen claimed to have knowledge of the location where Billy was buried, but he was later charged with interfering with the police investigation after the site was searched and nothing was found. He was sent to prison for 4.5 years. The case has seen many twists and turns over the years, one of which occurred when Madeline sued Billy's family, claiming that they'd accused her of being involved with his disappearance and that she knew what happened to him. She won the case and was awarded a total of $52,000, though this ruling was later overturned by the Supreme Court, and Madeline eventually withdrew the case. Very little progress has been made in the case since then, and while Hansen and Karpiuk are still considered people of interest, there's no way of proving that Billy was a victim of foul play, though investigators feel that it is likely. Billy is described as having brown hair and blue eyes, weighing 200 pounds and standing 6 feet tall. He would be 51 years old today. His family told the police that he has a tattoo of a blue cross and the name Pruitt on his left arm, with another blue cross on his right shoulder. At the time of his disappearance, he wore a diamond stud in his left ear. If you have any information on Billy's case, you're asked to contact the Waterbury Police Department at 203-574-6941 or the New Haven FBI office at 203-777-6311. When 18-year-old Ebby Stepek suddenly disappeared from Little Rock, Arkansas in 2015, she made headlines all over the U.S. She was found deceased 3 years later, and 9 years after she disappeared, the case remains unsolved. What is known about Ebby's last movements is that she attended a party on the 23rd of October without permission from her parents. According to text messages that she sent to her stepfather, Michael, she was assaulted by 3 men while at the party, and when she found out that one of them had recorded the assault, she threatened to go to the police. The following day, she spent some time at her grandmother's house, mostly lying in bed and watching cartoons. She had dinner at their house, after which they visited a TCBY store where they had frozen yogurt. Her cell phone records would show that she called the Little Rock Police Department at around 7:30 p.m. on the 25th of October, but they would later state that they had no record of these calls taking place, despite records showing that each of the calls lasted for about a minute. Ebby then spoke to Michael about the assault that had taken place, and they agreed that she should go to the police. They agreed to meet up later to go to the police station together. She then told her grandparents of their plans, but when her family tried to get in touch with her later, the calls went unanswered. Her brother Trevor managed to get in contact with her, but he told the police that she sounded strange and couldn't tell him who she was with. Bizarrely, she told him that she was sitting in her car in front of his house, but when he went outside, there was no one there. He managed to call her back, and she then told him that she didn't know where she was. This was the last time that anyone spoke to Ebby. Following her disappearance, Ebby's family and friends did everything they could to find her, but to no avail. When her family traveled to the police station to file a missing person report, they were erroneously told that they needed to wait 12 hours before reporting someone missing. And 3 days later, her car was found in Shalamont Park next to a wooded area. The park was searched by investigators, but nothing was found. And in an effort to gain more information, a $50,000 reward was announced. Since then, Ebby's family has accused the Little Rock Police Department of mishandling the case, as they seemingly took their time to interview witnesses and review CCTV footage of a Walmart that she was known to have visited. The case went cold for 2 years until Ebby's remains were found in the very park that had been searched earlier, drawing more ire towards the police from her family and the community. She was found inside a drainage pipe, which in 2015 had been reported by her friends as emitting a foul odor. When officers arrived at the scene, they seemed disinterested and told her friends that their dogs would have picked up the smell of human decomposition, and that the smell was likely caused by a decomposing animal. No one has ever been named as a person of interest in Ebby's case, and many people feel that her murder could have been solved had the Little Rock police acted appropriately. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.